True by Spandau Ballet. With me is Tony Hadley, the former lead singer for the band. He's going to swing into the U.S. in a few days, and we're going to talk about it. Thanks for coming on Revenge of the 80s Radio with me, Tony.
Thanks, mate. Cheers. How you doing? All right?
Spandau Ballet was one of the most well-received new romantic bands on the American charts in the 1980s. Some of the core was together during the high school years. Talk about how the band formed.
Well, the band formed, to be honest, like a lot of traditional bands, really. We were at school together, school in London called Dame Alice Owens. And we just got together when we were 16, with I suppose, the arrival of punk, really, in the school music room. And we used to look around playing, I don't know, R&B covers like Saw Us Standing There, Carol, Silver Train, stuff like that. And then eventually, you know, we finally became Spandau Ballet, and things were changing in London, the club scene was changing, and we become the musical sort of spokesman for a sort of new romantic generation, if you like.
Tony, Spandau Ballet sounds nice and cultured, but it's more of a moniker that would pique the curiosity of a European history buff. Why did you choose to name the band after a famous prison?
Well, we didn't choose the name. It was a friend of ours, Bob Elms, who's a journalist and a radio jock in England, and it was he'd been to Berlin's. Always had a lot of mystery. Berlin's one of those kind of cities. Bowie, Iggy Pop visited Berlin, so. And he was in a club, and he saw it graffitied on the wall, Spandau Ballet. We didn't have a name at the time. And he came back, and he said, I've got the name, I've got the coolest name for you guys, Spandau Ballet. And we were like, what? You know, we were as mystified as everybody else as to where the name came from. We thought it was different enough that, that it would be great to stick with it. And that's what we did, you know. It's certainly different.
Tony Hadley is my guest on Revenge of the 80s Radio, and different it is, Tony. In fact, most Americans only know Spandau Ballet from your hit songs like True and Gold, but you were very different before you hit the international scene. Talk about the early Spandau Ballet sound.
Yeah, I mean, that was a problem, to be honest, in the States, because the first thing that they ever heard, really, was True. In mainstream, I'm talking about. So, and they thought, hey, there's these nicely dressed guys who are playing this this nice ballad kind of thing. And actually, in the early days, we were very much a kind of synth four on the floor dance band in a lot of ways. Experiment with a lot of new technology, almost kind of like Depeche Mode, if you like. And also, I think live-wise, we were always a much tougher band than we ever were on record. And we never really got to prove that enough in the States, and which is a shame. But hopefully, with Tony Hadley coming over, I'll change all that.
In those early years, you actually had two of the most synth-heavy type producers in the history of music. We know a lot of Trevor Horn's work in the U.S. You also work with Richard James Burgess, who was the producer, notably, of King's 2 albums and Adam Ant's Strip.
Yeah, I mean, both Trevor Horn and Richard Burgess, they're very kind of synth-orientated guys. I mean, Richard Burgess was also the drummer and producer in a band called Landscape, which were very alternative, with songs like Einstein a Go-Go. So it's, we came from a club background, if you like. But I suppose the interesting thing about Spandau Ballet was that we were never afraid to try different things. And True was a different departure from us, but was also the very first thing that people in America heard.
It's funny you mentioned Burgess's band, and he's a drummer. He actually had to play drums for King in their first album, Steps in Time, because the quartet didn't have a drummer.
I think you're right, actually. Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, I thought King were a great band. I thought Paul King was a great front man, and it's a shame they didn't make it bigger than they were.
I want to hear some more of Paul King, I have to tell you that. There's a guy I should put on the show.
You should, definitely.
I'm going to pop him a call. I'll have to do that. And back to Americans not knowing much more about Spandau Ballet before you came here with True, Gold, and the like. You came in here looking great with the nice suits. Most of the radio industry and even MTV sort of gave you this image here as a bunch of nice balladeers, and it was almost in disregard to your history. That didn't help when you changed over a bit the next time.
No, I suppose not really. Spandau Ballet, in a sense, I suppose, is a band that's best to have started with it and ended with it, because then you would have seen the various different changes, fashion-wise, music-wise, that the band went through. Certainly, as we've said in America, True was the song. It was number 4 for 4 weeks in America. So the band were better known for a song than known as a proper band. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that we didn't do in America was we didn't tour enough. I mean, America's a massive, massive country, and we should have toured. And this is my first venture into America as a solo artist, and we want to try and build on these few shows, and hopefully achieve the reputation that we've got in Britain and the rest of Europe and the rest of the world as a great live band. And we can come back to America, more and more.
It's hard for any band to change because once you're pigeonholed, especially in the U.S., it's hard to escape that image. But you did manage to change over successfully both in Britain and Australia. Talk about that third portion or that third incarnation of Spandau Ballet in the late 80s that was more rock-oriented.
Yeah, Australia was one of the countries actually, along with Britain and other parts of Europe, that were with Spandau Ballet from the very first single, to cut a long story short, right to the end when we made our last album in 1990. We went through, I've always been I love rock music anyway. John Keeble, the drummer, is going to be with me in America and coming over with me. He's a real kind of bit of a rock drummer, really. And so I think we were all closet rockers, really. I think we all really wanted to sort of get the guitar and turn it up to number 11 and rock out. So the kind of certain parts of the last couple of albums were actually quite rocky, yeah.
You all went your own separate ways after that. You went solo. A couple of guys went into acting. But you got back together for another recording in 2009.
Yeah, we sort of just disintegrated, really, as bands do sometimes. And then we found ourselves in court years later, as bands do sometimes. And then you find yourself back in each other's arms again, as bands do sometimes. It's just, bands are funny things. 1 minute you're hot, 1 minute you're cold, 1 minute you love each other, 1 minute you don't. It's a very complicated marriage. And but we finally got it together in 2009 and rekindled our friendship, which was fantastic. And we went on a very successful tour all around the world, apart from America. Don't ask me why. I haven't got a clue. But, it was great, and it was great to get back with the band, and we had a good time. But it was a one-off tour. Whether it will happen again, I don't know. And we all went off after that with a friendship, going off and doing our solo stuff,
Well, that leads me to ask, how did you manage to bury the proverbial battle axe with Matt Kemp after the royalty issues?
To be honest, it was John Keeble, the drummer, I call him the Henry Kissinger of pop. Anyone who wants to get a band back together again, use John Keeble, because he's very good. He was kind of very instrumental in slowly getting the fractured bits of the band back together. It took 6 months or more for myself and Gary, certainly, to sit around a table and have a pint of beer in an English pub. It's amazing what a pint of beer or 2 or 3 can do.
It works for me. Helps me when I'm on the air, too. Tony Hadley is my guest on Revenge of the 80s Radio. Straight ahead, we'll talk about his solo career and the newer projects and a new album coming down the pike, plus his upcoming U.S. mini tour.